Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We feel safe in our communities when our communities have a strong social fabric.
It's also about all the things we do to support kids so they don't get involved in a criminal lifestyle.
Two of BC's major party leaders focus on public safety as they hit the campaign trail the day after their televised debate. Plus,
because of the high demand this year, it was a little more difficult to keep us in the arena.
game on! The Vancouver Canucks kick off another season with their home opener. What will ticket sales be like after last year's playoff run? And a monster nearing land. Hurricane Milton moves closer to Florida as officials warn of massive damage.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The day after the televised leaders' debate, two of BC's main party leaders were back on the campaign trail as Election Day inches closer. In Vancouver, the BC Greens unveiled their plan to improve public safety, while NDP leader David Eby tried to shore up support with almost half a dozen events. The CBC's Mira Baines has more.
BC NDP leader David Eby had a packed schedule, starting the day with a photo op in Vancouver, then hitting two key Lower Mainland cities that could see tight races. In Richmond, he laid out his tax cut for couples and multi-generational families, aimed at saving them at least $1,000 a year.
That's why our middle income tax cut is focused on immediate support for families like yours.
A roundtable with South Asian media in voter-rich Surrey put the NDP leader in the hot seat over questions about public safety and health care. 10 ridings there are up for grabs.
It's also safe communities. It's whether or not the provincial government requires police to enforce federal firearms rules. Who would have thought that would be an issue? But John Rustad has committed that he will direct the police not to enforce those basic rules in our community.
A new hospital in Cloverdale is 2 years behind schedule.
New hospital, new medical school, new patient tower, all of it being delivered for the people of Surrey.
BC Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau came off the televised debate with an endorsement from actor Mark Ruffalo. She announced her plan to improve public safety, including a task force to investigate violence directed at Indigenous women.
This is a police task force with officers and community leaders. It will have a strong oversight from Indigenous communities, particularly Indigenous women.
Furstenau says she would also disband the RCMP's Critical Response Unit, which was tasked with policing resistance to the Coastal GasLink pipeline.
Heavily armed police, excessive violence, violations of human rights, putting Indigenous people under surveillance in their own territories does not show us a government that's invested in reconciliation.
BC Conservative Party leader John Rustad had no events planned the day after the televised debate. Rustad is under pressure to release the costs for his campaign promises as Election Day nears. He suggested that could happen later this week. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
A day after the debate, we went to Vancouver's downtown east side to see how people there are feeling about the upcoming election and what issues are resonating with them.
We have a lot of homelessness on the downtown east side, and we also have people with severe addictions, and there's no treatment centers, no detox beds.
There's a lot of elders on the streets right now, man, and it's sad. Nobody's even helping them.
My idea would be to have BC Housing step in every time they build a new facility for low-cost housing, is to have at least 2 or 3 floors dedicated to people that want to get clean.
All these old buildings that are sitting around here that can be renovated, should be renovated and used for low income, because there's one right here, the Regent, it's just sitting there.
Now, still with housing, during David Eby's time as Premier, his government passed bills to increase density around transit hubs and in single-family home neighborhoods. As Chad Pawson explores, that work did not resonate in some ridings where the NDP is now looking for votes.
Burnaby North. This riding was reclaimed by the NDP in 2017 after the party was embedded here from the 1960s right up to the early 2000s. But now, this election, the orange glow could be fading here once again.
It's our homes, it's our properties, it's also the anchor of our security.
Homeowners here in Burnaby's Brentwood Park have taken issue with the province's aggressive housing bills, one that forced municipalities to change zoning bylaws to allow multiplexes on single-family home lots. Another bill also allows for small apartment buildings on lots like these because they're close to transit hubs.
This legislation's come in too fast, too heavy-handed, too top-down for it to be without mistake.
A year ago, the NDP announced its bold plans to introduce legislation that would push housing density in municipalities. Ravi Kahlon, the Minister of Housing at the time, acknowledged the move might not be universally popular.
We now need to start taking action. And so I suspect many communities will be happy and some communities may not be. But we are in a housing crisis.
And there has been unhappiness. West Vancouver reluctantly changed its bylaws after yielding under threat of a ministerial order. The riding's incumbent MLA says it's not sitting well with voters.
There is now a huge backlash against what people are seeing as property rights being taken away from them, being pushed to do things in their communities that they're not having say in.
There's also concern in Coquitlam. The city has been progressive in adding density, especially around transit hubs, and the BC NDP bill calling for the same upended the local approach.
They brought in a one-size-fits-all, and it wasn't really needed in communities like Burnaby and Coquitlam and Surrey.
The BC Conservatives have picked up on the displeasure and are promising to repeal Bill 44, which allows multiplexes on lots with single-family homes, saying, quote, "We will work with cities, not against them, to build the housing BC needs." The Conservatives do support multiplexes in communities, but instead of enforcing them with legislation, will use $1 billion in financial incentives available for municipalities whose zoning allows for viable multiplexes on at least 2/3 of residential land. NDP candidates in ridings in play over this issue are working hard to communicate their party's multifaceted Homes for People action plan. Worth $19 billion over 10 years, the party says so far it has delivered or begun building 80,000 homes.
On the doorstep, what I'm hearing is that, in general, people are happy and that the risk is going back to letting sort of that, speculation and empty housing and everything go back to what it was before when John Rustad was in government.
Many municipalities say they want density and want to partner with the province over it. In Oak Bay on Vancouver Island, the NDP incumbent is not running again, leaving the race wide open. The city's political leader is asking for collaboration with whomever forms the next government, saying they need to share the same goals.
We were all working on housing ahead of these initiatives. Nobody's pushing back saying we don't want to find innovative housing options. So at the end of the day, we're just trying to work well with the province to come up with those housing pieces.
This race appears so far to be tight, according to pollsters, and a central theme is if voters are okay with the NDP's prescriptive approach to solving problems like housing, or feel in neighborhoods like this pushed too far and plan to vote for change. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Burnaby.
A new survey is shedding more light on how Canadians earn a living. It shows millions are taking on gig work on top of a full-time job to help pay the bills. Our Susanna Da Silva takes us through the numbers.
3, 2, 1.
Emmett Swee has the morning off from her full-time job, that is.
It is a juggle because after full-time job, if I'm not doing a photo shoot, then I'm editing photos.
Okay, that's good.
She took up photography after losing her job during COVID, but even after getting another full-time job working on the website of a Canadian airline, she didn't stop.
If I don't have that additional income, then I'm basically living paycheck to paycheck.
3, 2.
Her story is one shared by millions of Canadians, according to a new survey by insurance company Securian in partnership with the Angus Reid Institute. It found 22% of Canadians, or 7.3 million people, are doing gig work. That is short-term contract work or one-off projects. Only a small fraction of those are food delivery or ride-sharing.
There's a lot of diverse gig work out there, like dog walking, photography, consulting, digital platforms.
And financial need is a big driver, with 53% doing gig work to cover increasing basic costs or to be able to put some money aside, despite the fact 56% have full-time jobs and 44% already earn more than $100,000 from their primary job.
Even folks that are earning incomes that we would have thought would be more than sufficient in previous times are really feeling some financial stress.
But this expert says it is employers who have been pushing the trend for years.
Where they're not necessarily going to be offering the same level of, of benefits, they're not making pension contributions.
Luckily for Emma Tsui, her photography gig has taken off.
The additional income coming from photography allows me to save for my first down payment, as well as, I use that money for travels and whatnot. So just to live a little bit more.
Yeah, one more.
Like many Canadians, her side gig is now a much-needed part of life. Susanna Da Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Maggie Ip, the founder of Success, a well-known social service agency for new immigrants in Metro Vancouver, has died. The organization says Ip was a dedicated servant for newcomers.
I'm not sure I can really fully capture all that she has contributed. We, posted this news internally to our staff, and the amount of outpouring of comments and, heart emojis just being unbelievable. And I think it's just a testament to the amazing legacy that she has really left behind.
Success says Ip was born in Shanghai and moved to Vancouver with her family in the late 1960s. Success celebrated its 50th anniversary last year. There's a live look from our studios to downtown to Rogers Arena in the rain, where Vancouver Canucks fans are heading to see their team take on the Calgary Flames in the home opener. Expectations have been high for the Canucks after a second-round playoff exit this summer. The team expects more demand for seats, but as John Hernandez reports, slow sales means fans might still have some reservations.
Because of the high demand this year, it was a little more difficult to keep us in the arena.
Canucks superfan Carlo Bodrogi is gearing up for the team's home opener. He's the leader of the diehard fan group, the Larshiders, a loud crew that usually takes up a whole section of seats. But this year, they might not be as noticeable.
The Larshiders will be there, game one. We may be a little bit farther in the back. We may be even higher in the nosebleeds.
During the off-season, the team told these fans they wouldn't be allowed to return to the section they've occupied for years because of an uptick in season ticket holders. Instead, they were moved to a suite with about a third of the capacity.
The Canucks allowed us to keep the initiative going. We've lost 2/3 of our seats. We're not in the arena cheering anymore, but we're in the Rogers studio suite, so we'll be harassing the reporters from up there.
A strong regular season and memorable playoff run reignited much of the fan base in Vancouver and seemingly drove up demand. This season, the cheapest standard regular season Canucks ticket you can buy costs about $109. That's up from just $48 last season, meaning a 127% price increase.
Everybody wanted to go to every game, and I think the team jumped on top of that and say, hey, let's hit time while it's hot, and it's hot right now.
And tickets for marquee matchups like the home opener were priced even higher, upwards of $200. But this ticket broker says there's signs demand might not actually be so strong. Sales for that game have been slow, which has actually driven down the prices.
Sales weren't where the numbers were at. I'm sure that the organization thought that they would be at, and I'm saying they dropped 30 to 35%.
Bailey says the sales slump means many fans likely feel priced out, while others are taking a wait-and-see approach.
If this team comes out of the gate like they did last year, it's going to be great. But if they come out of the gate like the Oilers did, we are in deep trouble.
A supply and demand tug of war that will ultimately be decided by how this team performs on the ice. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hurricane Milton has made landfall in western Florida. Top officials say the damage could be catastrophic, with storm surge expected to inundate the area, and you can see it right there. The storm has been downgraded to a strong Category 3 storm, with winds still topping 200 kilometers per hour. It's set to impact areas near Tampa and Sarasota, an area where over 3 million people call home. Already, there are reports tornadoes have touched down in parts of the state. We'll have more after this. Hurricane Milton has made landfall, packing winds of more than 200 kilometers per hour, expected to push across the entire state of Florida, all the while maintaining its hurricane status and threatening everything and person that's in its path. Our Katie Simpson is in Orlando with more.
By all measures, Hurricane Milton is nothing short of catastrophic. A monster of a storm that's already having a devastating impact, spawning dozens of tornado warnings across Florida, with touchdowns reported in and around Fort Myers, leaving behind a dangerous trail of destruction. This debris could be picked up by hurricane-force winds and become projectiles. All of this well before the worst even arrives.
There is high confidence that this hurricane is going to pack a major, major punch and do an awful lot of damage.
It's looking like the storm of the century. I know it's really tough, leaving behind your home, your belongings, everything you own. But I urge everyone in Hurricane Milton's path to follow all safety instructions.
Gulf Coast communities from Sarasota to St. Petersburg could see storm surge up to 4 meters and winds peaking around 200 kilometers per hour. For anyone who ignored evacuation orders, police repeated the same blunt message they delivered before Hurricane Helene hit.
Find yourself a permanent marker, write your name, your date of birth, and your next of kin on your arm so we know who you are and who to contact.
Many have taken the warnings seriously, the urgent effort to flee triggering a different set of concerns.
One of the biggest challenges on the ground in Florida right now has to do with fuel. So many people have been rushing to get out that gas stations have had to tape up their pumps because they're out of gas.
Though leaving town isn't an option for everyone, shelters in the storm's path are starting to fill up.
It's a lot of anxiety, plus I'm homeless. So living in my car and trying to equip with all of this is pretty difficult.
In central Florida, the biggest concern is flash flooding. While there are no evacuation orders here, some people are on edge.
It's very nerve-wracking right now because I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Katie Simpson in Orlando. Darius Madavi, our climate and science specialist, joins us now with our look at the weather, but let's check in, obviously, with what's happening with Milton.
Right, so we're continuing to see that hurricane move closer to the inland sections of Florida. It made landfall just less than an hour ago because the officials said that even though we can't see it on satellite, the radar imagery is very clear. And you can see the eye of the storm very well defined here when we layer on that radar. You can see those outer bands of rain and thunderstorms. Most of the tornado risk will have passed because those rain bands are now off of Florida, but there is still a chance of more tornadoes. You can see here the path that it's taken over these record warm temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. And that's why we see that storm managed to hold on to so much of its strength, even though it encountered some really high wind shear, sort of cutting the top off that storm as it moved closer to Florida. So you can see it lose that really defined eye, but then grow in size. And that is what made a part of what made the storm so dangerous. The tropical storm force winds, the hurricane force winds, were just extending so far out from the storm center. So you can see we're expecting it to remain a hurricane even as it passes over the entirety of Florida. That's why we have hurricane warnings on both sides, both coasts of the state. That's why we have tropical storm warnings, very widespread as well. We're expecting to see those impacts be very, very widespread. Here are several cities in Florida, and you can see even as far inland as Orlando, potentially extreme impacts in some of these areas. So we're expecting to see very high storm surge that is likely going to be one of the most dangerous factors, potentially the most deadly. Some areas expecting to see over 4 meters of storm surge. It's up to the second story of a building, so very bad impacts there. The tornado threat is still present in many places, although lessening. The wind threat is also huge, and this is what I want to emphasize, just the radius of those winds. You can see in purple there that hurricane force wind, how large that is, about 50 kilometers out. The tropical storm force winds essentially cover the entire state, Dan. So the entire state of Florida experiencing those potentially deadly and devastating winds.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
The day that was in Nanaimo, politics there set to undergo a change with now 2 ridings. Coming up, we talk about that change and what it could mean for the election. Stick around. Voters in the north end of Nanaimo on Vancouver Island will head to the polls like most British Columbians on October 19th. But their candidates may be different after riding boundaries were redrawn last year. This is part of a regular process done once a decade as an independent commission looks at BC's population growth and recommends updates. Claire Palmer has more on the changes and potential impacts.
On one side of the street, one candidate. Mere steps away, different candidates. Redrawn ridings have Nanaimo residents split.
I'd rather see just one person I could speak to for any concerns I have in Nanaimo, as opposed to figuring out, okay, am I in the sort of the north or the south of Nanaimo? Who do I speak to? I think it's just over. I want a simplified approach to deal with, my representatives in government.
The new map created the Nanaimo Landfall riding, a combination of an old Nanaimo riding and the Parksville-Qualicum riding. Incumbent MLA Sheila Malcolmson will be running in the South End Nanaimo-Gabriola riding. The two ridings are surrounded by the U-shaped Ladysmith Oceanside riding.
Boundaries matter. They certainly affect elections. There's no question about that. But they have to be redrawn. There's also no question about that. We have to keep the votes of the people reasonably equal.
Following the last provincial election, the Electoral Boundaries Commission redistributed the seats. In 2023, 4 new ridings were added to the Island and Lower Mainland area, and the boundaries redrawn in several communities, with the goal for each riding to have approximately the same number of people.
The Boundaries Commissions try and get the people approximately equal in each district. And why is that important? Well, it's a foundational democratic principle. One person, one equal vote. If some votes are worth more than others, then some people have more influence than others.
Local candidates for the riding say there are pros and cons.
Ideally, having 2 MLAs means that you have double the representation so that your needs can be better served, because oftentimes it's separated based on population and caseloads. So that is sort of the practical reasons behind splitting a riding. The impracticality behind it is that people can live in one side of the riding and work in the other side of the riding.
And while the boundaries might have changed, the topics remain the same.
What I'm hearing at the doorsteps is that people care about affordability, they care about health care, and that's what this NDP government has been focused on.
Nanaimo residents are urged to check their voting cards to make sure they know which riding they're to vote in on October 19th. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
Political commentators have had plenty to say about last night's televised leaders debate. CBC's The Early Edition host Stephen Quinn talked with some of them about their highs and lows.
David Eby was basically a Crown prosecutor trying to convict John Rustad on all the charges, while also trying to convince the jury that everything is hard and complicated. Sonia Furstenau was the philosopher queen, basically giving a dissertation on wealth and inequity. And John Rustad, in the meantime, was a guy who sees a problem, says the problem is a big problem, and then says that he has the common sense solution to solve the problem, but doesn't actually say how.
Time to take you back to BC's first televised leaders debate. It is from October 8th, 1991, when the Social Credit's Rita Johnston was premier, facing off against the NDP leader Mike Harcourt and the BC Liberals' Gordon Wilson in a fiery exchange. Have a look.
This was the man with the most to lose tonight, NDP leader Mike Harcourt. Leading in all the opinion polls, he couldn't avoid a debate he had called for so early on. SoCred Rita Johnston had a lot riding on this too. Social Credit is down in the polls, and it's up to her to keep the party in power. This is the man with nothing to lose, Liberal leader Gordon Wilson. His party has no seat in the legislature, no record to defend. He was scrappy a week ago, pushing his way into the debate, and tonight he was scrappy in debate.
You're back to the future, looking to the past, and start to turn and look to the future, because that's what the people of British Columbia want, is a leader that looks to the future. With all due respect to Mr. Harcourt, we're not electing a mayor of BC. We want a premier that has vision and a leadership, and with due respect to Rita, I've said publicly before, and I'll say it in front of all British Columbia, you were a good Minister of Municipal Affairs. I don't think that that's doubtful. But you have behind you the same Delta Surrey backroom gang that were behind Bill Vander Zalm. British Columbia.
But going into tonight's debate, the contest was undeniably between Harcourt and Johnston. How far would either go to score a political point? Would either one take any risks? or would they play it safe?
User pay system where you pay at the door. Take your pick. You're the one that has to come
Why
clean to the
don't you
people of British
stop
Columbia.
scaring the
Because
senior
you
citizens
have
of this
not yet
province with your
told
lies?
Who you're going to tax. You were the one that introduced the property purchase tax for first-time home buyers.
That's
to take
right.
it away now, when I voted against it in the first place, is a bit much, Mrs. Johnson. You shouldn't have introduced it and hurt young British Columbians trying to buy their first home in the first place.
You're skating around it, but we want the numbers, Mike. We want the numbers.
I've told you the numbers.
You
the
don't
bottom
have any
line is a
numbers.
balanced budget. We'll
You're
set
afraid
tough priorities.
to give us the numbers.
We'll set tough priorities above the line, and the bottom line is a balanced budget.
You're gutless. You won't give us the numbers.
This reminds me of the legislature, and here's a classic example of why nothing ever gets done in the province of British Columbia. Right here, you saw it live on CBC.
And that at least got a laugh out of the reporters watching the debate with the spin doctors, those party advisors trying to put the best light on their leader.
So this debate ended up being a very significant one for Gordon Wilson, as his party won 1/3 of the votes cast, making the BC Liberals the official opposition in the BC legislature after having no seats since 1979. It also signaled the end of the long social credit dynasty. Flash forward 33 years. Last night, BC viewed the political party leaders squared off on important issues ahead of this election, now just 10 days away. But with social media and information available with a quick Google search, do political debates like this still hold the same value? Joining us now to talk about the impact of political debates is Hamish Telford, political science professor from the University of the Fraser Valley. Hamish, we appreciate your time. In your opinion, do these political debates still hold value?
Absolutely. For many citizens, the debate is really the only time that they tune in seriously to the election. It was an hour and a half last night where a lot of people tuned in, perhaps for the only time in this campaign. Of course, two of the leaders are new, David Eby and John Rustad, so it was their best opportunity to get to know these leaders. And so it is still significant. However, we don't tend to see the same sort of dramatic outcomes from debates as we saw in that 1991 debate. The leaders are overly prepped for this, and they're prepped not to make mistakes rather than to win. And so they're so coached that there's rarely anything really dramatic happening in the debates, and not much that will shift opinion in the way that Gordon Wilson was able to shift opinion in that debate 35 years ago.
What were some of those standout moments from last night's debate for you?
Well, of course, John Rustad and David Eby were going at it pretty hard. But the line that really stood out for me was Sonia Furstenau when she suggested that Mr. Rustad wants to take the province back to 1957, that was his vision of the future of the province.
All right, and I think we have that clip that we want to play from Sonia Furstenau. Let's play that again.
It's fascinating to me that John Rustad's vision for this province is one that's rooted somewhere around 1957. I mean, he cannot look ahead because he can only look back. He is so limited in his imagination of what's possible. And when it comes to reconciliation, when it comes to sorting out rights and title, what we have to do, the hard but essential work we have to do, all John Rustad can do is look back to when he was Minister of Indigenous Relations, and what he wanted to do was visit First Nations that had golf courses. He is not seriously taking this issue and recognizing the serious work of a provincial government is not to politicize this, not to make people afraid, but to recognize that to move forward, to create economic certainty, to create economic prosperity for everybody in BC, this issue has to be sorted out.
Hamish, perhaps not a Gordon Wilson knockout moment, but it carried weight for you.
It did, especially that first part where she just sort of encapsulated in that one sentence the essence, in her mind, of John Rustad, and really what David Eby was trying to get at with all of his attacks on John Rustad, but he didn't have that single line which encapsulated everything that he was trying to say in an easily conveyable message, was what Sonia Furstenau did there, and then she was able to elaborate on the point. So I think that one exchange that she had with John Rustad was much more effective than the many attacks that David Eby tried to launch against Mr. Rustad, who I should say was not fazed by any of these attacks.
Now, how do cultural and demographic shifts in BC, do you think, influence the effectiveness as debates as a tool for engagement? Is it mostly for if I can say it, older voters, or what do you think?
Well, judging by my students' reaction today, it is for older voters. I asked my classes today who watched the debate, and
no
none
offense
of them
to you.
did. However, I did make my 18-year-old son watch, so at least one teenager watched at least some of the debate. So yes, I think, and television, of course, is something which young people don't engage with as much anymore as older people do. I find it difficult to speak for other demographics, particularly new Canadians, but I do know that some media outlets were broadcasting the debate live in translation into Punjabi, Mandarin, Cantonese. So hopefully members of those community were able to tune in and hear the debate in real time in their own language.
And lastly, Hamish, we appreciate your time. Do you think this debate made a difference for anybody who hadn't made up their mind on who they would vote for?
I rather suspect not. I think all of the supporters of the leaders probably thought their leader won the debate last night, which of course is how they prepped for it. But there may be a couple of things that come out of it. Perhaps the dual attacks by David Eby and Sonia Furstenau on John Rustad may make a few people question Mr. Rustad. The other thing I thought was interesting was Sonia Furstenau definitely running to the left of David Eby, which meant that he was getting it from both sides. On the one side, he was getting it from going too far on certain policies, and from Sonia Furstenau not going far enough, which I think in the end puts David Eby in the middle. And of course, this election, I think, is going to be decided by whoever is able to capture the middle. So although it may have been a difficult night for David Eby, he may have come out of it in not a bad position.
Hamish Telford, political science professor from the University of the Fraser Valley. We appreciate your time and insight as always.
You're welcome.
Other news now. Israel and Hezbollah continue to trade fire across the Lebanon border. And on both sides of that border today, there were more deaths. The CBC's Chris Brown reports from the northern Israeli city of Haifa.
In Israel's north, alerts from incoming Hezbollah missiles were constant, with the streaks of Israeli interceptors filling the skies, knocking out most, but not all. The worst damage was in Kiryat Shimona, where a couple reportedly out walking their dog was killed. And in Haifa, 5 people were sent to hospital with injuries. Our CBC News team visited the scene of an earlier strike that knocked a hole in the roof of an apartment building, leaving missile fragments everywhere but not causing any injuries. There was a big noise and a lot of dust, said the maintenance manager, who'd been in the apartment 30 seconds before. People can't live here because they're afraid to come back and sleep here. From the owner of the fishing shop below, we heard support for Israel's actions against Hezbollah in Lebanon. I think this is very good, he said. What did Netanyahu say? This is for generations to come, that there won't be any wars anymore. But just seconds later, more alarms and more missiles, with our team taking shelter in the walk-in refrigerator of the grocery shop next door. Since Israel launched its ground invasion of Lebanon, the Haifa area, 40 kilometers south of the border in Israel's third largest city, has become one of Hezbollah's key targets. After having much of its leadership assassinated by Israel, Hezbollah has attempted to project strength with its mass rocket fires and by claiming that Israeli troops have made little progress on the ground.
The country should be very concerned.
Ehud Omer is a former Israeli prime minister. He negotiated Israel's exit from the last war with Lebanon in 2006, and he fears the cost of defeating Hezbollah militarily is too high.
Are we ready to have 100 missiles, rockets shot at Israeli civilian centers every day with more than 1 million people sitting in shelters for the whole day? I mean, what is the strategy?
In Lebanon, Israel's air assault has been unrelenting, with at least 4 people killed near Sidon and a building housing displaced families, according to the local mayor. Chris Brown, CBC News, in Haifa.
Just before 6:42, that is a look at Florida tonight as the state braces for the wrath of Hurricane Milton. What environmental factors go into creating a storm of this magnitude? We're going to tell you right after this. Many environmental factors going into creating a hurricane, but scientists say one of them has been pushing recent storms to new limits, and that is ocean heat. Anand Ram now on what some are calling a marine heat wave.
Milton started as a growl in the Gulf of Mexico, and within 2 days became a terrifying roar, the fastest shift from tropical depression to Category 5 hurricane ever seen there.
2 days later, we were at 180 miles per hour winds. That kind of intensification is just extremely rare, if not unheard of.
It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours.
That speed leaving seasoned weather watchers speechless.
I apologize. This is just horrific.
And what's feeding the beast? What fed Hurricane Helene just before it? Record ocean heat. This is the global average sea surface temperatures for roughly the last 30 years. But in 2023 and 2024, every month the heat has surpassed that by a huge margin. And zooming into the Gulf of Mexico, it's more intense. 2024's heat so far, higher than the last decade. And a few degrees matter.
Small differences in temperature, boom, big differences in the amount of water vapor that's getting put into the atmosphere. And that water vapor is really the fuel of the storm.
The other conditions that let Milton rage was a lack of other weather patterns, slower winds, air offering less resistance to the rapidly forming vortex. Watching that buildup especially troubling for those in the hurricane's path.
Especially for the area that I grew up in, I feel it's very heavy.
And climate scientists link the warm oceans that supercharged Milton to the planet warming effect from burning fossil fuels.
It traps energy around the planet close to the surface and warms up our air temperatures. But that also contributes to that heat getting eventually down into the ocean.
And as Florida braces for the full might of Milton, researchers with World Weather Attribution are already looking at how much of its scale and ferocity was caused by climate change. That analysis expected within days. Anand Ram, CBC News, Toronto.
Darius Madavi joins us now with an updated look at our weather and a check-in on Milton.
Yes, I just wanted to mention the storm continues to move over Florida, and I just wanted to highlight the fact that we've heard a lot in the last year about how we're approaching that 1.5 degrees Celsius limit for the air temperature, but the ocean has absorbed 90% of the excess heat generated by human-caused climate change, which is why we're seeing not just record warm ocean temperatures in the Gulf, but temperatures well above normal for this time of year. And we will continue to see those as the ocean continues to absorb our warmth. And it is a delayed effect as we continue to warm. We've already committed to at least another decade or two of ocean warming. So just good context to have when we talk about these storms and how they are intensifying more quickly. But if we do turn our attention back here to BC, a little bit of excitement in places. We have some precipitation coming in the central interior, down in the southeast, as well as a few lightning strikes. But some of the excitement is actually down here on the south coast. Over the last few hours, we saw some lightning strikes happen around Iqaluit and then make their way down here. We were expecting them to pop up along the sea to sky, but in fact, we actually got a few of them right here in Vancouver. This is the last half hour, and you can see those strikes pop up at around 6:21. If we take a look at a photo that we captured on our own live cam here, you can see that lightning bolt right there, along with the best rainbow I've seen in a very long time, which is exciting. And I think we actually have a video of it. See if you can catch it. I know the flash goes by pretty quickly, but you can just make out the lightning happening. Whew. Oh, yeah.
We heard it.
So good. Yeah, it's inside a soundproof studio. We still heard it. So it was quite the strike. A lot of excitement there. Things are continuing to calm down now, though. We're drying out across at least downtown Vancouver, and then that will continue throughout the lower mainland overnight tonight for a very sunny day tomorrow, which we can actually see here. We saw that little bit of heavy precipitation, a bit of a downpour that only lasted a couple minutes, and then that cleared out. Tomorrow, we're going to see some clearing up throughout the morning and then a sunny afternoon. As we get into Friday, some cloud will move in for the morning, but then clear out again for the afternoon. Mainly sunny afternoon, I'd say. Not quite as sunny as tomorrow afternoon, probably, but it'll get there as we get into the evening. If we zoom out to the rest of the province, we also have some precipitation coming at times across BC. A little bit of cloud in many places as we get into tomorrow. It's really just something scattered. In the northwest, we may see some more snow and some rain feeding in there over the next few days, but overall conditions remain fairly calm. It looks like we're going to have a very pleasant Thanksgiving weekend across the province. Fairly seasonal. Temperatures in the southern interior today were a bit above seasonal. They'll remain a little bit above seasonal tomorrow and into the weekend, but not quite as warm as we were today when we were back in the 20s. But overall, conditions remain very pleasant, really across BC, as I said. Lots of sunshine tomorrow, some more rain hitting the coast, maybe a drizzle in the early morning in Victoria, although I didn't put it on there because it will be so short-lived. And in terms of a 5-day forecast here in Vancouver, there's that rainbow. That actually fits today. We've got some clearing up, as I mentioned, tomorrow morning, a little bit more on Friday, a very sunny weekend, and then the chance for showers on Monday. I wouldn't guarantee it. It keeps getting pushed back, may get pushed back some more, but the possibility is there.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
There's a look from our studios as crowds head toward the Rogers Arena, the home opener for the Vancouver Canucks. Watching the game on your TV used to be a pretty simple affair. But as Peter Armstrong reports, the broadcast game is ever-changing.
Opening night, a new season, new hope for fans, a fresh start for teams.
Drops one, shot, score!
And this season, it's not just new teams or new plans. It's new ways to watch as well.
It's a new home for hockey.
Amazon Prime is now streaming some hockey games after making a deal with Rogers.
Look at Cooley go through the middle of the ice.
It's all part of a rapidly changing broadcast landscape. To watch every NHL game this season, you'll need to subscribe to Sportsnet, TSN, TVA, and Amazon Prime.
I think we're headed for an era of greater complication.
Back in 2013, Rogers Communications bought up the exclusive rights to all nationally broadcast NHL games for $5.2 billion. That deal doesn't expire until the end of next season. But NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman says negotiations will start soon, the beginning of 2025, he told the Sports Business Journal last month, adding that Rogers gets first crack at renegotiating its current deal. And that is something Rogers has said it wants to do.
It's something we're very interested in and something we will chase and certainly expect to be at the table.
Second and goal.
Experts say other sports leagues have found ways of spreading out broadcast rights over multiple broadcasters and streamers. That drives up the price and makes it harder for fans to even figure out where the game on any given night is being aired.
If you have 6 people that want your product, then you can figure a creative way to give each of the 6 a slice. You will get more than if you charge one the entire amount of money.
And every year, there are more ways to slice that pie. And though some may bemoan the changes,
I think it's actually going to be easier, and they're trying to move the product to where people are, as opposed to trying to preserve an old model.
It's on Monday.
Whether it's the game or the way we watch it, the old model is long gone. And changes to how we watch the game are only starting as the NHL gets closer to a new deal in 2026. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, Toronto has decided to embrace its love-hate relationship with the city's raccoons, so it dedicated a park to them. Why not? That's next.
And now a look at Toronto's brand new Midtown Park, dedicated to a special someone, the infamous Trash Pandas.
The city embraced its affinity for its unofficial mascot with a Raccoon Park inaugurated last night, and the CBC's Dale Manukduk was there.
They're everywhere, in our attics, scurrying around our fast food joints, climbing to the top of our construction sites. Well, the tables have turned, little guy. Now we can climb on you at Raccoon Park on Soudan Avenue near Yonge and Eglinton.
Love them or hate them, they're here. We share the city with them. And yes, we spend a lot of time, and understandably, talking about our grievances with what they do to our properties and our garbage cans. But they're also part of our lives, and sometimes you gotta take even the things that frustrate you and celebrate and embrace.
Local councillor Josh Matlow brought out the community to unveil the park.
3, 2, 1.
Kids seem to love it. They also love raccoons for reasons only kids would. What do you like about raccoons?
That they're smelly. Sometimes they're funny when they get messy. And I really like that about raccoons.
One raccoon decided to crash the party, but you know what? Let's just ask him. Let's just be clear here. You were not asked to come here by the city councillor or the city.
No, I was not.
What's the story behind the raccoon costume then?
This is called a kigurumi. It's just a onesie. This is a raccoon themed one because I live in Toronto and I love raccoons.
Wow, that's really great for you.
That is awesome. I love raccoons. When I was in university, I was on what was called the trash team.
Whoa.
We educated people about plastic pollution, and our mascot was a raccoon, which was my favorite part.
Wow, combining Trash Pandas and nerds in one go. Amazing.
Thanks. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Janella Hamilton will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.